The woman stood silent as Marines escorted her across the flight deck. Whispers followed, mockery from those who never understood her purpose. Admiral Blackburn watched with stern satisfaction as the helicopter lifted away. Good riddance to dead weight. 30 minutes later, alarms blared throughout the carrier. Missile threats incoming, defense systems offline. The Admiral froze as he stared at the monitor. A countdown appeared, initiated remotely by the same woman he had just humiliated. In that moment, he realized his terrible mistake. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories of unsung heroes and powerful redemption, please consider subscribing. We share new military stories every week. The morning sun glinted harshly off the massive flight deck of the USS Leviathan as F-35s thundered into the cloudless sky. Below, in the Combat Information Center, Specialist Astria Nix sat isolated at her terminal, fingers dancing across multiple screens with practiced precision. Unlike the uniformed personnel around her, she wore simple civilian attire with only a peculiar silver badge hanging from her neck, its quantum encryption markers occasionally catching the light. She had been aboard for 3 weeks now, and still, the crew regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and resentment. The badge granted her access to systems that even senior officers couldn't touch, yet she carried herself with a quiet humility that some mistook for weakness. Chief Petty Officer Wayland approached her station, coffee in hand, not bothering to hide his disdain. "Running another one of your special diagnostics, Nix?" he asked, emphasizing the word special with mock reverence. Astria didn't respond immediately, her focus unwavering as anomalous code flickered across her screen. Something wasn't right in the carrier's cyber defense architecture. The pattern was subtle, invisible to standard security protocols, but unmistakable to her trained eye. "I'm speaking to you, Specialist," Wayland pressed, louder this time so others could hear. "I need to complete this scan, Chief," she replied quietly, never looking up. "There's an irregularity in the quantum firewall," Wayland snorted, glancing around to ensure others were listening. "Always with the techno-babble. No wonder the Admiral thinks you're dead weight. 3 weeks of your special access, and what have you actually contributed to this ship?" Several nearby technicians smirked but quickly returned to their stations when Astria briefly looked up. Her eyes, intense and calculating, revealed intelligence that made them uncomfortable. Before she could isolate the anomaly, her screen flashed red. "Access terminated. Security protocol 7 Alpha engaged. Someone had just locked her out of her own system." "Specialist Nix to the bridge, immediately." Admiral Calloway Blackburn's voice echoed through the CIC, drawing all eyes to her. She gathered her custom tablet, secured it with her fingerprint, and rose with dignified calm. As she walked through the CIC, the whispers followed. Temp support finally getting the boot. About time someone checked her clearance. What's with that weird badge anyway? 10 minutes later, she stood at rigid attention before the imposing figure of Admiral Blackburn. His weathered face, lined from decades at sea, betrayed nothing as he examined a report in his hands. The bridge crew pretended to focus on their duties, but every ear was tuned to the confrontation. "Specialist Nix, do you know what this is?" he asked, voice cutting through the hushed bridge. "No, sir," she answered, her tone respectful but not subservient. "Security flagged unauthorized access attempts originating from your terminal. Attempts to override missile defense protocols." He slapped the report down on the console between them. "Explain yourself." "Sir, I was tracking an anomaly in the defense system architecture that suggested potential compromise. In systems you have no business accessing, your temporary support staff, not Cyber Command." Blackburn's voice rose slightly. "Your credentials may have gotten you aboard my ship, but they don't give you carte blanche to poke around in critical defense systems." "Admiral, if I could explain the technical indicators I observed," Astria began, her voice steady. "I've seen enough technical jargon to last a lifetime," Blackburn cut her off, addressing the bridge crew now. "This is what happens when we let civilians with mysterious credentials roam freely on a nuclear carrier. 3 weeks of special treatment ends today." The bridge remained silent, but disapproving glances surrounded her. Commander Thorne, the executive officer, stepped forward from his station. "Sir, perhaps we should contact naval intelligence before taking action," he suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. I've already spoken with Command, Blackburn replied. They agree that the security risk outweighs any potential benefit of her continued presence. He turned back to Astria. I want this deadweight off my ship. Now. His words fell like a gavel in the silent bridge. Two Marines materialized at her sides as if they'd been waiting for this moment. Surrender your equipment and credentials, one stated flatly. Astria handed over her tablet without protest, though she carefully removed the silver badge from around her neck and placed it in a secure pocket instead of surrendering it. The Marine reached for it, but Blackburn waved him off. Let her keep her trinket. It won't work outside our systems anyway. The humiliation was calculated and public as she was escorted through the carrier's passageways. Sailors stopped and stared. Some whispered, others smirked openly. The woman who had arrived with mysterious authority was leaving in disgrace. Across the flight deck they marched her, past aircraft and flight crews, the hot Pacific wind whipping at her clothes. A helicopter waited, rotors already spinning, prepared specifically for her removal. Just before boarding, she paused beside Ensign Orion, a young officer who had always treated her with respect during her brief time aboard. If the system asks for quant seal verification, she whispered beneath the rotor noise, slipping a small device into his pocket. Use this. The ensign's eyes widened, but he gave an imperceptible nod as the Marines ushered her aboard the helicopter. Neither noticed Commander Thorne watching the exchange from the island superstructure, his face unreadable. As the aircraft lifted off, Astria watched the massive carrier grow smaller, her expression betraying nothing of what was to come. She ran her fingers across the silver badge in her pocket, feeling the quantum encryption nodes embedded within it. The badge that Admiral Blackburn had dismissed as a trinket contained more computing power than most military supercomputers. Inside the CIC, Ensign Orion returned to his station, the small device feeling impossibly heavy in his pocket. He glanced around nervously, wondering what to do with it, what it meant. Commander Thorne approached, causing him to stiffen. Everything all right, Ensign? Thorne asked casually. Yes, sir. Just watching Specialist Nix depart. Thorne nodded slowly. Back to normal operations now. The Admiral was right to remove her. Too many unknowns. If you say so, sir, Orion replied, careful to keep his tone neutral. As Thorne walked away, Orion carefully touched the device in his pocket. Something about Nix's intensity, the urgency in her whispered instructions, told him this was far from over. In the helicopter, Astria closed her eyes, mentally accessing the encrypted neural interface in her badge. The technology wasn't supposed to exist yet, at least not officially. It allowed her to maintain a tenuous connection to the system she had spent 3 weeks quietly integrating throughout the carrier. She had known this moment might come. The signs of internal compromise had been growing stronger each day. Someone aboard the Leviathan was working against American interests, and her removal had been orchestrated to prevent her from discovering who. The helicopter pilot glanced back at her. Pearl Harbor ETA 3 hours, ma'am. She nodded acknowledgement, but her mind was elsewhere, racing through contingency protocols. If her suspicions were correct, the Leviathan would face a crisis within the hour, long before she could physically return. As the carrier disappeared from view, Astria allowed herself one brief moment of concern. The Admiral had played right into the traitor's hands. The next few hours would determine whether her countermeasures would be enough to save 5,000 lives, including those who had just humiliated her. The first alarm came as a low, insistent tone, the kind experienced sailors recognize as genuine trouble. Radar operators straightened in their chairs as multiple screens lit up simultaneously. Sir, unscheduled satellite launch detected from Sector 7, called Lieutenant Farrow, voice tense. Trajectory consistent with military deployment. Admiral Blackburn moved swiftly to the Central Command Station. Threat assessment? Encrypted transmissions detected, sir. Pattern matches ICBM uplink activation protocols. Blackburn's jaw tightened. It had been less than 30 minutes since he had removed Specialist Nix from his ship. Surely this couldn't be related. Bring Aegis defense systems online. Alert the battle group. Yes, sir. The lieutenant's fingers flew across his console, then stopped. Sir, system not responding. Blackburn's eyes narrowed. Manual override. Authorization Blackburn Delta 6. The lieutenant entered the code, then looked up with growing alarm. Override denied. He swallowed hard. Sir, it's requesting something called quant seal verification. A heavy silence fell across the CIC. That's Nix's protocol, Chief Weiland said. his earlier mockery replaced by dawning horror. Only she had quantum authorization. Blackburn leaned over the console, reading the flashing request. What the hell is this? We can't have critical defense systems locked behind one civilian's access codes. Sir, the communications officer called out, incoming transmission from Stratcom, Priority Alpha. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of a 4-star general whose expression darkened immediately upon seeing Blackburn. Admiral, is Specialist Nix present? Blackburn straightened. She's been removed from the Leviathan due to security concerns, General. The general closed his eyes briefly. Then God help you. Specialist Nix isn't support staff. She's the director of Project Sentinel, Presidential Cybersecurity Task Force. Her presence on your ship was classified National Security Council directive. The blood drained from Blackburn's face. What? She was embedding fail-safe protocols in your systems, the only defense against the cyber attack we've been anticipating. The general leaned closer to the camera. Where is she now? En route to Pearl Harbor, sir, beyond immediate recall range. Sir, the tactical officer interrupted. Multiple inbound threats detected. 15 minutes to impact. Get me that helicopter, Blackburn ordered, but the communications officer shook her head. Sir, we've lost contact with Tango 3. Something's jamming our transmissions. Ensign Orion stepped forward, his young face pale but determined. Sir, before she left, Specialist Nix gave me this. He produced a small encrypted drive. She said it might be needed if the system asked for quant seal verification. As Orion handed over the device, all eyes turned to the tactical display showing multiple missile signatures converging on their position. Where's Commander Thorne? Blackburn demanded, suddenly aware of his executive officer's absence. Sir, a security officer interrupted. Surveillance shows Commander Thorne entering auxiliary control 5 minutes ago. He's overriding security protocols. The pieces clicked into place. It was Thorne. He framed Nix to get her off the ship. Blackburn inserted the encrypted drive. Send a tactical team to auxiliary control immediately. The screen before him remained stubbornly blank. It's not working, he muttered, frustration mounting. Sir! The communications officer pointed to a secondary terminal that had suddenly activated itself. Code scrolled rapidly across the screen. What is that? Who's accessing our system? Blackburn demanded. The tech officer stared in disbelief. It's coming from everywhere, sir. Multiple access points throughout the ship. Ensign Orion's eyes widened in realization. The maintenance she was doing yesterday. She was installing back doors. A message appeared. Quant seal verification accepted. Initiating counterstrike protocol. A countdown appeared on screen. 60 seconds. What counterstrike? Abort that immediately, Blackburn ordered, but no one moved. No one knew how. Sir, Marines have breached auxiliary control, came the report over comms. Commander Thorne is attempting to destroy evidence, but they've secured him. The countdown continued mercilessly. Blackburn grabbed the comm. Helicopter Tango 3, do you have eyes on Specialist Nix? After a moment of static, the pilot's voice crackled through. Sir, she's deployed some kind of device from the aircraft. She's working on something. Aboard the helicopter, Astria had unfolded a compact quantum field generator, linking it to a satellite uplink. Her fingers moved across it with practiced efficiency, the neural interface in her badge allowing her to process data at inhuman speeds. Ma'am, I need to know what you're doing, the pilot called back nervously. Saving your carrier, she replied without looking up, and exposing a traitor. Back on the Leviathan, every eye was fixed on the countdown as it reached 0. The screens flashed white, then settled on a message. Sentinel protocol active. Radar showed the incoming missiles suddenly losing guidance, veering off course, falling harmlessly into the ocean. Defensive systems came online at unprecedented levels. A complex web of connections appeared on the tactical display, revealing Thorne's communications with hostile forces over the past month. Every encrypted message, every altered record, laid bare for all to see. My God, Blackburn whispered, understanding the full scope of what had nearly happened. The comms officer looked up in shock. Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the battle group. They were experiencing the same systems failures. Whatever Specialist Nix did, it restored defenses across the entire fleet. In auxiliary control, Marines held Commander Thorne at gunpoint, His face was a mask of rage and defeat. "You don't understand what's coming," he spat at the Marine sergeant. "She's the real enemy. Her and her quantum encryption will give the government total control over every system." The sergeant remained impassive. "Save it for your court-martial, sir." Admiral Blackburn stood motionless on the bridge, watching as the tactical display confirmed all threats neutralized. The woman he had humiliated and removed from his ship had just saved everyone aboard from a catastrophic attack that would have left them defenseless. "Get me Stratcom," he said quietly. When the general reappeared on screen, Blackburn spoke with humility previously unknown to his crew. "General, the threat has been neutralized. Commander Thorne has been apprehended. Request immediate guidance on next steps." "First, get Specialist Nix back on that carrier. She'll need to verify all systems are secure and implement additional countermeasures." The general's tone was firm. "And Admiral, when she returns, I suggest you remember that appearances can be deceiving." "Yes, sir," Blackburn replied, the lesson already seared into his consciousness. As communications were restored, the helicopter pilot reported that they were returning to the Leviathan. Specialist Nix had ordered the turnaround herself, invoking authority codes that the pilot didn't even know existed. In the CIC, the crew watched in amazement as system after system came back online, stronger and more secure than before. Auxiliary stations that had been dormant suddenly activated, revealing defensive capabilities they hadn't known the ship possessed. "She built all this under our noses," Chief Weiland said in disbelief, "while we were mocking her." Ensign Orion nodded. "And she knew she might be removed. That's why she gave me the device." Admiral Blackburn overheard their conversation and approached. "She predicted everything, including my reaction." He looked around at his crew, his expression grave. "We owe her our lives." As the helicopter approached the carrier once more, Astria put away her equipment. The neural interface had allowed her to execute the Sentinel protocol remotely, but the strain of maintaining the connection had left her exhausted. She knew what awaited her on the Leviathan. Apologies, explanations, perhaps even gratitude. None of it mattered. The mission had been completed, the traitor exposed, the fleet protected. Personal vindication was irrelevant. The pilot looked back at her with newfound respect. "We're 5 minutes out, ma'am. The Admiral is requesting to speak with you directly." Astria nodded. "Tell him I'll need full access restored immediately. There's still work to be done." As the helicopter approached the massive carrier, she prepared herself for what came next. The Sentinel protocol had saved them today, but it was only the first line of defense against a much larger threat. Commander Thorne was merely one agent in a coordinated effort to compromise America's naval defenses. She would return to the ship not as a vindicated hero, but as what she had always been, a guardian working in the shadows, regardless of recognition or respect. The entire crew of the USS Leviathan stood in perfect formation on the flight deck. The sun was setting, painting the massive expanse of naval power in hues of gold and crimson. At the head of the assembly, Admiral Calloway Blackburn stood rigid, his weathered face a mask of formal military discipline that concealed the profound humility he now felt. 24 hours had passed since the attack. 24 hours of debriefings, investigations, and the gradual revelation of how close they had come to disaster. Commander Thorne had been transferred to a secure facility under heavy guard, but not before intelligence officers had extracted the names of his contacts and the full scope of the operation he had been part of. The distant thrum of helicopter rotors grew louder. Every sailor remained motionless as the aircraft appeared on the horizon and made its approach. Inside the helicopter, Specialist Astria Nix sat quietly, her face betraying nothing of the events that had transpired. She had spent the past day at Pacific Command, debriefing generals and intelligence directors on the cyber attack and the broader implications of Commander Thorne's betrayal. The quantum neural interface in her silver badge had recorded everything, providing irrefutable evidence and intelligence that would keep analysts busy for months. But her immediate concern was ensuring the Leviathan systems were fully secured against any lingering threats. As the helicopter touched down, she gathered her few possessions and the new equipment she had been issued. The door slid open to reveal the unprecedented sight of over 5,000 naval personnel standing at attention, with Admiral Blackburn himself waiting at the landing zone. Astria stepped onto the deck, the wind tugging at her simple civilian clothes. For a moment, she and Blackburn locked eyes across the distance. Then, in a gesture that sent shock rippling through the ranks, Admiral Blackburn raised his hand in a formal salute, an unprecedented honor from an admiral to a civilian. "Specialist Nix," he called, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "The USS Leviathan and her crew owe you their lives." She returned the salute with perfect military precision, then simply said, "I was just doing my job, Admiral." The crew broke into applause as she walked across the deck, her slight figure somehow commanding the massive space through presence alone. Chief Petty Officer Wayland stood among them, his earlier mockery replaced by genuine respect as he joined the applause. Later, in the privacy of the Admiral's quarters, Blackburn offered her a formal apology. "You were right about everything," he admitted, the strain of the past 24 hours evident in his voice. "I let my prejudice cloud my judgment. Your credentials seemed irregular, your presence unexplained." Astria nodded, neither accepting nor rejecting his words. "Our systems worked exactly as designed, Admiral, including the human element." Blackburn's brow furrowed. "You predicted your own removal? You used it as bait?" "We knew there was a leak. We needed to draw it out." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Your reaction was anticipated." "And the back doors you installed throughout my ship? The systems I knew nothing about?" "Project Sentinel has been embedding failsafes in all strategic assets for the past 18 months. Your ship was merely the latest." She tilted her head slightly. "You never wondered why temporary support staff with unusual credentials kept rotating through your command?" Blackburn sank into his chair. "Who exactly are you, Specialist Nix?" "Officially, I direct quantum cybersecurity initiatives for a classified task force." She touched the silver badge at her neck. "Unofficially, I identify vulnerabilities before they can be exploited by any means necessary, including allowing yourself to be humiliated and removed from this ship." "Personal dignity is irrelevant compared to national security, Admiral." Blackburn studied her with new eyes. "What happens now?" "I finish my inspection. The real one." She stood. Commander Thorne wasn't working alone. For the next 12 hours, Astria worked tirelessly, moving throughout the ship with renewed authority. Crew members who had previously ignored or mocked her now stood aside respectfully as she passed. The whispers that followed her were no longer derisive but awed. In the CIC, she methodically examined every system, using her quantum interface to detect anomalies invisible to standard security protocols. Ensign Orion assisted her, eager to learn from the specialist who had saved them all. "How did you know to give me that device?" she asked him during a brief respite. "I didn't mock you like the others," he replied simply. "I figured there had to be a reason someone with your credentials was aboard." She nodded approvingly. Observation, the most undervalued skill in modern warfare. By midnight, she had identified and neutralized 3 additional security breaches, each more subtle than the last. None were actively threatening, but all could have provided access points for future attacks. Admiral Blackburn observed from a distance, a man fundamentally changed by having his worldview shattered and reassembled in the span of 24 hours. The woman he had dismissed as deadweight now commanded his ship more effectively than he ever had, not through rank or authority, but through sheer competence that could no longer be questioned. As dawn broke over the Pacific, Astria finally completed her work and prepared to leave for good. The entire CIC staff stood at attention as Admiral Blackburn approached, holding a small box. "The Navy Cross," he said, opening it to reveal the medal. "Extremely rare for a civilian, but your actions saved this ship and possibly prevented a wider conflict." Astria accepted it with a simple nod, then handed him a final encrypted report. "There are others like me on every carrier in the fleet, Admiral. You just don't know it yet." Blackburn took the report, understanding its significance. "The quiet ones." "The ones who work best from the shadows," she confirmed. "Remember that next time you encounter credentials you don't recognize or protocols that seem unusual." "I've learned that lesson rather thoroughly, Specialist Nix." She shouldered her pack, ready to depart. "One last thing, Admiral. The young officer who stepped forward with my device, Ensign Orion." "What about him?" "Keep an eye on him. He has the right instincts. In my line of work, that's more valuable than any technical training." Blackburn nodded. Consider it done. As Astria walked away toward the waiting helicopter, the Admiral looked around his bridge, seeing his crew through new eyes, wondering who else might be more than they appeared. On the flight deck, Chief Petty Officer Wayland approached her before she boarded. "I owe you an apology, ma'am," he said stiffly. "No, you don't, Chief," she replied. "You behaved exactly as expected. That consistency is actually valuable in my line of work." He blinked, unsure if he'd been complimented or insulted. "Will we see you again?" "Not if everything goes according to plan." She smiled briefly. "That's rather the point." The helicopter lifted off, carrying Astria away from the carrier once more, but under vastly different circumstances than her previous departure. Below, the crew went about their duties with renewed purpose, many glancing up occasionally to watch the aircraft disappear into the distance. In the CIC, Admiral Blackburn opened the encrypted report she had given him. Its contents would occupy strategic planners for months, but the opening paragraph captured his complete attention. Project Sentinel operates on the principle that the most effective defense is invisible until needed. Our specialists are embedded throughout military and civilian infrastructure, unrecognized and often underestimated until the moment of crisis. This is by design. A guardian recognized is a guardian compromised. He closed the report, thinking of all the temporary staff who had rotated through his command over the years. How many had he dismissed? How many quiet specialists with odd credentials had he overlooked? The woman who had saved his ship and exposed a traitor had been one of many, working silently in a system that often failed to value their contributions until disaster struck. It was a humbling realization for a man who had built his career on the visible trappings of authority. The quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who save us all while remaining in shadows, the guardians we mock until we need them most.